So yeah, with that, let's talk about addressing conflict and difficult meetings. After the first call, that's for the first training day, we sent out a poll which asked all of you, asked the community for their interests and what they'd like. And so these two issues of conflict and just meeting difficulties kind of rose to the top. And so I put together this training based on some other work that I've done in the past to discuss ways to address this and try to diminish conflict as much as we can, or address it in a constructive way, in a way where we can all, including maybe the quote offenders, can feel part of the solution. So we're all familiar with meetings that don't go well, right? You set up your meeting if you're leading it, you plan your activities, you try to keep it engaging, and then something happens that throws everything out of balance, right? Staying focused at such times is a really big challenge. People can get exasperated. Some people just shut down. Some people, just want to try to take over the leadership, right? Or even just try to pick a fight. So we're going to talk today. I'm going to talk a little bit today about some of the causes of disagreements and what to do about them. So we can go to the next slide. Thank you. Right. So, periods of misunderstanding and confusion are totally normal especially when a group is wrestling with a difficult problem. So today we will talk about the 3 levels of disagreement. We will talk about seeing people problems as group problems, right? Or problems of individuals, right? As actually maybe it's more a group problem. And then ideas for tackling these issues that come up. So I'm going to run through a whole lot of sort of ideas and things today. So this presentation will be pretty word heavy, but ideally it's something you can refer to after the training today, and you can really use as a reference for preparing, or even if you're in the midst of something. So next slide, please. All right, so why do people disagree? So these 3 levels of disagreement, I have to get this is not mine. This comes from an organization, and the name is totally escaping me right now. I will get this to you after. Anyway, but they talk about these levels, right? So level 1 is a disagreement over information, right? So people may just not be hearing or understanding what one another is talking about. A level 2 disagreement, in the case where I'll sort of talk about them today. Level 2 is different values or experiences. And level 3 is a disagreement that arises from outside factors or past history between people. So there's these sort of different, maybe it's different levels. This organization sees them as different levels. You might just see them in sort of different, different qualities, maybe. So, or just these different categories, maybe not one on top of another, but just 3 distinct types of things that start to arise. People more often than not, disagreements that we find in meetings are due to level 1 or type 1 disagreements, these disagreements over information. So we're going to talk about that too. Next slide. Okay, so we'll talk about level 1. Well, I'll sort of take each of these one at a time. So a level 1 disagreement is a disagreement over information, right? So people have not clearly heard or understood another person's idea. I have the other's alternative, right? Or another idea or the reasons for supporting that idea or that alternative, usually for a way of doing something or a proposal in a meeting. facilitators, people who are leading meetings, can provide a great service simply by finding a way to have people listen to each other. Quieting the first side, having them listen to the other side, and then quieting the second side and having them listen to the first side. Just by listening to each other, the people disagreeing often find that they're not actually disagreeing at all, or that there's ways to merge these ideas. What are some examples of a level 1 disagreement? Does anyone have a good example that may have come up recently? You can either speak directly or type it in the chat. Sometimes speaking directly is faster and more fun. This is any example of a level 1 disagreement. I'm seeing from Karen, information about who, what, when, cost, or logistics details. Okay, yeah, so someone might be saying, okay, we're going to be doing this at this time or with this people, or we have to buy these certain, or someone that might say we have to buy supply, says we have to buy this itemized list of things, and it's just because people are using different words, right? Sometimes people think that they're getting, it's actually a conflict when it's not. So just getting that, that clarity. Okay. Next slide. Hang on. Yeah, so a level 2 disagreement arises from different values or experiences that people have that they might bring to the table. So it gets a little bit more knotty, a little bit more complicated sometimes. So maybe people have heard and understood one another, but they have had different experiences, or they hold different values or perspectives that result in preferring one to the other, right? So it may be that there are actually 2 different things that are being discussed, and different people can't agree because they have, because they understand that maybe the problem or the situation in very different ways. Same question. Does anyone have an example of a level 2 disagreement? When have you seen something like this in the past? Yeah, thank you. Thank you for translating. Adriana was translating Karen's answer to a level 1. What about this level 2? What about if you're planning an event and part of your meeting attendees want to do, one type of, want to maybe like ask people to bring food, and the other type really doesn't want to ask people to bring food. And there are sort of reasons that, people might feel that, like cultural reasons or other reasons about, feeling, that it's not right to ask people to give something like that. And meanwhile, other people might feel like, you can't have an event where people don't bring food because that's just what people do. So people are maybe coming from 2 different, just cultural experiences or understandings of what an event is or what a celebration is. Yeah, Lisa's saying, I was going to say, yeah, cultural differences absolutely might lead to a level 2 disagreement. Okay, so next slide. So the third level, this third area of disagreement, the more I read level, the more I'm thinking that level is not the right term here. I think it's more like the third type of disagreement is, it's called outside factors, or it's around outside factors. So it's based on just, it says here personality, maybe there are two, it's usually like two people in particular that might have a very sharp personality difference. They might have a past history with one another outside of, this organization or this meeting, or maybe other factors that have nothing to do with, I have the alternatives here, but it might have nothing to do with the choices that are actually on the table at the meeting, right? If a group is trying to make a decision about something, or you're trying to discuss an issue that's come up or a way forward, people who are having a level 3 or a type 3 disagreement might just, basically be picking a fight with each other rather than actually discussing what the alternatives are that the meeting is supposed to be talking about or deciding on, right? These types of disagreements based on personality cannot be resolved during a meeting. It can be a huge, waste of time, frankly, to try to resolve an issue during your meeting session, right? Because typically issues based on personality or past history, they take more time than you can afford to give to the larger group there, right? So if we're I'm thinking, that the first training we had, we talked about the needs of the group, right? And so if you're starting to recognize that the needs of the group are different than what maybe two arguing people, what they need, then maybe it's like, okay, we need to serve the needs of the group now and sort of refocus. So that also gets to just some other notes I had here for myself around, how do you recognize a level 3 disagreement is happening? And the way that you recognize it is that maybe this argument either has no logic at its base at all, or the parties arguing show no interest in resolving the argument. Then it's probably about something else. It probably, doesn't have anything to do. So the thing you can do in this moment, and frankly, the thing you can do in any moment when there might be, an intense discussion or maybe a disagreement in a meeting where you feel like you're not quite sure how to move forward, one of the best things you can do is what? At that moment, if you're leading the meeting, what's one of the first things you do? Oh, the meeting is kind of going sideways, or these people are arguing. What's one thing you can do as a leader? Does anyone know what I'm about to say? Take a break. Just take a break. Call a break. Looks like we need 5 minutes. Let's all get some water, and we're going to come back and figure out where to go from there, right? So one of the first things you can do, rather than trying to really lean into some, an issue, if you're not quite sure, is, just pause, right? You're calling for a pause. And as a leader, people in the meeting are relying on you to shepherd the meeting along. They're relying on you to, make sure people are going to get the work done that they have to get done. And so it's a very important job as a facilitator, not only to encourage discussion and make sure there's full participation, but also to make sure if someone is dominating the conversation or some issue is dominating, that really is not in the interest of the full group. It's, if they're relying on you to also shut that down, or at least to bring it into a place where it can be tackled, by the participants in the room. Lisa's saying, what's another thing you can do? Yeah, bring back focus on the mission. Absolutely. And sometimes the best way to do that, or the best time to do that, again, is after a break. So take a break. It'll allow you to get your head back together. It'll allow you to maybe pause for a minute and say, what is really going on here? Is this about these two people? Is this about, like, maybe these two sides of the room don't understand what they're saying? Or is this more an issue of like a values difference or a cultural difference or some other kind of difference that we need to, maybe lean into and talk about some more? So it'll just allow you to really figure out what to do next. And, so during that break, also, you can, if you do recognize that it is a level 3 disagreement, what you can do is meet with the parties privately to indicate that you just don't think we're going to solve this in this session tonight or during this day, right? We're not going to solve this here. Maybe we can go to a higher source together for resolution. In essence, you want to sort of, you want to get the two parties or the two sides to figure out a different time and place to resolve this issue if it's not relevant to what you're trying to talk about at the meeting. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Yeah. So I was talking, I brought up the needs of the group. So if you were here, even if you weren't here, I've put them on the screen. So what we talked about in our first meeting, if you recall, was the 4 needs of a group. And these are over on the right-hand side here. We've talked about how a functioning group that is, working together, where there's people that need to get some things done, and yeah, a group of people that care, that want to get something done, right? There needs to be mutual acceptance. There needs to be clear purpose and goals for why we're all here, why we're spending our time here in this meeting. There needs to be effective information sharing. So people need to be able to share information and understand one another. And there also needs to be organized operations and structure. So people need to understand how they can, input, how they can take action, like where they can find the information they need, things like that, so that things can function well. So if we think about those 4 needs of a group, I guess what I want to ask all of you is, what relationship do you see between the 3 levels of disagreement that I just introduced and these needs? Why do I have these on the screen together? Do you see any level or description of level that sort of is similar to one of these needs?
This is Ariel.
Yeah, hi.
Hi. Level 1 and need 3 seem very related. Yeah, so it seems like different levels of conflict relate to different needs not being met.
Yeah, I would agree entirely. What might be an example of like a need not being met? Like if we don't have mutual acceptance in our group, what kinds of disagreements might start happening?
This is Karen. I think the different values, one way to support the group is by, if people have the idea already that they'll work with mutual acceptance, making space for that if there's disagreement. And then I also wanted to say, I've had the experience where there can be challenges just because of structures or limitations, that not the right people are at the table, or it could be that there's not enough time, or these other sort of logistical things that can get in the way. And I was thinking about, like, that's where clear purpose and goals, or looking at the organized operations and structure, like, are there methods in place to manage those kinds of issues that come up?
Yeah, thank you for bringing those other, I guess, variables to the table. You're right. I'm not. I guess what I'm sharing isn't entirely complete. I guess I was thinking more about when we see interpersonal, either conflict in meetings or just disagreement, where two parts, 2 or 3 or 4 different groups in a meeting might have different ideas about how to move forward or something. So, but yeah, absolutely not not having the right people there. Maybe you just don't have the information that people need to move forward, and maybe that is a moment where it's like, okay, we just need to pause and maybe come back and we can get that information or something. Yeah. Any other thoughts on looking at these two lists side by side? All right. Well, I mean, one thing that I talk about a lot is, obviously the best way to deal with conflict is prevention. It's preventing that conflict. And so that's why I often will start with talking about the needs of a group, because if we are focused on meeting the needs of this team of people here, of the whole, of the collective, then if you actually are looking at those 4 needs, it's not as likely that you're going to have as many disagreements come up in your meeting. So prevention is a great way. But yeah, I guess I think a lot about level 1 and 2 problems, these disagreements over information or disagreements over values and experiences. I think of them as a group problem, rather than being an individual problem, right? So a lot of times, actually, we can go to the next slide if you'd like. Yeah, so this slide, I'm sort of seeing people problems, right? Oh, we have this problem person in our group, or we have this thing that keeps coming up, right? A lot of times the group, again, is looking to the facilitator or the leader to save them by addressing the people who are, quote, causing maybe some negative or uncomfortable dynamics, right? But eliminating that symptom I have here, eliminating or fixing individual personalities, or just trying to tackle it by talking to an individual, usually doesn't remove the cause of the issue, right? Often the expression of what comes out as conflict, or what comes out as discomfort and frustration, is usually has a deeper underlying cause that has to do with how the group is run, how much trust and acceptance there is, and these other needs that I'm talking about, how well the sort of systems, how well people feel like they can participate. So the point is that dealing with people usually doesn't remove the issue. So we need to think of these problems sometimes, or at least ask ourselves, is this a group problem, or is this really just, this person that has a personality and there's nothing we can do about it, or we need to sort of figure some other solution out. So it's sort of a challenge to all of you as leaders, wherever you are leaders in your lives, where you are facilitating meetings, to hold up a mirror and figure out if some problem that is arising can be handled supportively and can be handled as a group thing that can be worked on. So let's go. I have a series of slides now on ideas for addressing various level 1 and level 2 problems. And so this is where it may just feel like this laundry list of options, but again, and we can pause because I'd love to know if any of you have seen any of these types of ideas, in action in your own meetings that you've been part of, to help bring any of these ideas to life for the rest of us. But yeah, if nothing else, you'll have a couple of resources to come back to and think about. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so addressing a level 1 problem. Again, this is disagreement over information. So there's sort of this 3-step process that you can think of, kind of like your back pocket, let's try this first. So, right, if it's this sort of, what one side is saying, they want something, and the other side maybe just isn't hearing them and are trying to say something else. The first thing you do is delineate the alternatives, actually try to articulate what is being said. Okay. And one thing that's really important, which is not on this slide, is you want to start with agreement, right? We seem to all agree that, that this, right? It's we might want to, we're all in agreement that we want to solve this problem, or we're all in agreement that we have something to give here, and that we could do something, and that we have the energy, right? So start with agreement, start with a positive, and then confirm the source of the disagreement, right? So where we seem to disagree is this, and check in, right? Is that right? Right? Write the issue down, write the issue under discussion, and then write down the 2 or the 3 proposals for moving forward on, on a poster or on a whiteboard or wherever you have it, right? So getting them just very clear. So that's what I mean by delineating the alternatives. Those are big fancy words for basically saying, show, define what each side is talking about. So get that down in writing and just check for agreement. So then step 2 is to identify strengths and weaknesses. And so this is something you can do, again, as a facilitator of a meeting. It's well, let's just talk about the pros and cons, right? Have the entire group focus on, okay, let's take this first proposal here. Let's look at this one alternative. Let's talk about the strengths. Let's talk about the weaknesses. Actually, I take that back. Again, going with focusing on the positive first, it's best to actually talk about the strengths of each proposal and then go back and talk about the weaknesses of each proposal, rather than taking one proposal at a time and doing strengths and weaknesses and strengths and weaknesses, strengths and weaknesses. Go strengths, weakness, weakness, weakness. Because then what that does is it gives value to each alternative, right? Before participants have an opportunity to devalue them during the the weaknesses conversation, right? So that's an important piece in terms of giving support to every art, giving support and seeing the value in each potential solution, right? And then step 3 is, ideally, you want to merge the alternatives. You want to merge the best aspects of the different alternatives, right? So maybe there's, strength of option 1 and strength of option 2, but we don't want to just go with one of those because we'd be missing something from the other one. And so there's your opportunity when you have these things in front of you to bring the group along with you and say, okay, well, here, what if we pull this idea from pathway 1 into pathway 2, and that'll make pathway 2 even stronger. So anyway, that is a sort of a quick thing you could try if you're realizing that people just sort of have these 2 or maybe 3 different ideas and they can't come to agreement, or they can't come to consensus about how to do it. This is also a way to basically form consensus over a way forward for sort of group decision making, right? You write out the options, you talk about the strengths of each option, you talk about the cons of each option, and then you try to find something that merges the best from all of them. Or if nothing else, what you've done is you have very clearly and fairly laid out, the strengths and weaknesses of all of them, and then people can really see why one might be best and can, be comfortable with moving forward with one option, even if it wasn't their idea. Okay, so now I have about 5 or 6 different thoughts about a level 2 problem, because level 2 problem, to go to the next slide. Thank you. So level 2 problems, again, are these sort of issues of different values or experiences or cultural differences that people have. Let me just check the chat for a minute to make sure there aren't any questions. Okay, good. Okay, so one idea, if we're trying to bring people together around, frustration with the incompatibility, right, of an idea with a value, you can do something. This first idea is it's basically like a role play situation. If I were you, and if you were me, like, or this says, if I were you / how will this affect me, right? So have participants actually role play one another's perspectives and then debrief it, right? It's like, okay, you sort of scenario building. Okay, so if we go this way and you are me, or person A plays person B and person B plays person A for a minute, let's just talk about what comes out there. Has anyone ever seen something like that in action? People trying on a different person's experience? This can also just be a really good way to just do some trust building in your group, like without even talking about a particular issue or decision you're trying to make. Sometimes people just literally stepping into another person's shoes and running a scenario can help people get a different perspective and build more compassion, build more empathy in that way. Next slide. So next slide is, or this idea, this backing up from solutions to needs. This reminds me a lot always of the training that we had a month ago on the focused conversation method, where we talked about the 4 parts of a discussion, of the 4 parts of sort of thinking about something, and that really is 4 levels, right? There's this sort of surface level where there's no wrong answers, down to real analysis and resolve about what to do in your discussion. And sometimes what you need to do is just back it up. And why are we jumping to this conclusion? Why are you jumping to having to do this solution? Why are we jumping to that solution? Maybe we need to back up from the solutions and really just talk about the needs. This little onion here is sort of, I don't know, in some ways it's kind of, the needs are on the inside, whereas in a focused conversation, you're almost getting sort of from more surface to depth. So it's a little different, but this is another good way to think about it, right? This outside of the onion in this picture is, this, it's sort of like what someone says they want. And then a little deeper as, what I really want is actually something else, right? And then what I actually need is on the inside. So what you can sometimes do is, go back to your focus conversation skills around saying, okay, well, what are we seeing here, right? Go back to that observational level. What do we know? What do we know about the situation, right? There's no real wrong answer there, because people will say, well, I know that my experience is this, and I know that I've seen this before, or that. And then it's like, okay, and so then what ideas do we have about this, or what, rather than jumping to like, what should we, or what options are open to us, right? So you can ask a more open question to get people thinking a little bit more broadly than their single solution that they've already posed. And in that process, people are hearing different people's experiences, maybe with the situation. And so you're also building more shared awareness and some more compassion within the group to maybe get to a solution that is more inclusive of everybody's needs. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Idea 3. So identifying shared values and going back to your shared vision or mission. This is somebody said this earlier. They're like, oh, if we're having a disagreement, pause and let's go back to like, let's read our mission again. Let's read out what our vision was when we all first got together, or what our shared values are, right? Reminding the group what they're all hoping to achieve, like what's important to all of us. Yes, this is a valid idea over here and a valid concern that you have on the other side, but what's important to all of us together? We said this was important to all of us. And so and I have a question here, right? So what new or inspiring things are happening? Again, like trying to keep things, not ignoring the negative, or not, discounting that there are valid, maybe, concerns or issues that are coming up, but making sure that people also talk about, acknowledge what the positive is, like what is happening, what opportunities can we take advantage of, where have we been successful before? Questions like that will maybe get people, it leads to some more transformative energy than simply, we got to figure this out and let's stop getting distracted, which I think a lot of us have kind of that's been modeled for us a lot in all of our lives. Just this sort of need to like get this done and focus on like a singular solution so that we can move on to the next thing. I have some notes to myself here. I just want to make sure. Yeah, so has anybody ever seen this type of, has anybody ever done this with their group where they've literally just taken a pause, or the leader of your group has taken a pause and said, okay, we're getting kind of scattered here, or there seems to be a lot of different things going on. Like, can we just remind ourselves of our shared values or our mission? Has anyone seen that work before? Anyone feel like they want to try that with their own groups? Anyway, it's an interesting, it's like one of those things, like, why do we do this? Why do we have a mission? Well, here's one reason: because it's really easy sometimes, or not really easy, it's really, it can be easy for a group to lose sight of why we all came together. Oh, Jack is saying Leslie does this and it works. That's great. Pausing and saying, okay, yes, what do we all say we wanted to be here for anyway? Let's talk about that and talk about how we are being successful already, or how, or what, what is already leading us towards there, can sometimes, redirect the energy into a more positive and transformative direction. Okay, next slide. Idea number 4, I have 6 ideas here all together. So these are just like all different kinds of things that can try to sort of bring it, knit a group together when you have these different, different sort of disagreements that are happening because of values or experience or perspective or cultural difference. So another idea is establish group agreements. I'm sure a lot of you have, formed, whether they're called, shared agreements or ground rules or group guidelines or what are other names you guys have for these? Any other names you all use or you've seen used? For sort of like, this is our way that we're going to communicate with each other. This is the way we're going to be together. We're agreeing to all being like this, and we can hold each other accountable if we break these guidelines or these agreements. You can form them. If you've never done this before, you can form shared agreements. Doesn't take very long. It can take 10-15 minutes at the start of your next meeting. You could say, we, I saw this thing, I was on this training, and it was shared with me that we could actually, you just form a set of shared ways to, that we're going to all participate in our meetings. And maybe some of these ideas are around, but sometimes groups have like nobody speaks twice before everybody speaks once. Things like step up, step back, things like, oh my God, like everything's flying out the window right now. But like silencing cell phones, unless you are monitoring some emergency at home or have childcare that you need to, right? So just coming up with things that everybody can agree to, so that little things don't start to bother people and then cause bigger issues. I'm saying little things, but a lot of times, sometimes they're big things, like full participation. If you truly want everybody to have a space to speak, you can set rules around how often people speak, or it's like take care of your own needs, things like that, right? If you need to use the bathroom or get a drink of water, like that's fine, right? Rules for the meeting, yeah. And Lisa's also saying here, if we get to really know each other in our groups and cohorts, then it is easier to understand where they're coming from. That's absolutely true. And I think sometimes that happens, either it happens over time of just working together and being together. And sometimes groups can actually set aside time to really facilitate that. But sometimes groups find that you've come together around maybe a very important and very, an issue where you have limited time to work on something. And so everybody's really, focused on that thing. And then inevitably you run into a place where people are disagreeing. And sometimes it has to do with people just not knowing each other or understanding each other as much. So sometimes setting some group agreements can help for people to learn about one another, because that process of forming these agreements can help people learn about each other. But also it just gives you something to stand behind, especially as a leader of a group, so that you don't have to be the mom of the group nagging everybody to behave the whole time. You can say, remember, we all said this, we all said we were going to behave this way. All right. I had another one here. Idea 5, next slide. Okay, so support seat. Who here has used appreciations in their meetings to appreciate someone, something, appreciate someone or appreciate something about that person? Or even just going around a group and everybody saying something they appreciate about someone else. You do one-on-ones, you could group people into pairs and have each person say something they appreciate about the other person, give people equal time. Has anyone ever tried this? Where have you seen this? All right, well, I encourage you to try it sometime. If nothing else, what appreciations can do, even if it doesn't necessarily speak directly to the issue at hand. Again, if people are in a conflict over how to move forward on a particular decision, even just taking a break and doing appreciations or closing your meeting with appreciations can help people to, you know, feel good about coming back next week, or it can just put them in a different headspace. And again, it's, you know, building that trust, that group need of you know, awareness and you know, shared acceptance of one another. It puts that heart into the meeting and those relationships. Okay, last idea for this one, these different values and experience. Last slide, next slide. Oh, this is just another idea about learning about each other, right? Playing a game, playing two truths and a lie. Each person or a few volunteers, even, they can come to the front of the room, you know, they can share two truths and one lie about themselves and see if the rest of the group can guess which is which. It's a game, but it's one of these, I'm going to go back to your question, Leslie. Yeah, so sorry, with two truths and a lie, it's a way for people to just learn about one another. It's, you know, can be used as an icebreaker, but it can also be something where, you know, the question of like what the truths and the lie that you're asking people to share can be more directed at maybe people's experience with a certain thing, a certain issue, right? It doesn't have to be just, you know, two truths out of nowhere. It could be, okay, tell us two truths and a lie about your experience with cooking. You know, tell us two truths and a lie about you know, being your experience as being a parent or something like that, right? So it can help to build those bridges between people, and it can also help people to see that people are coming from different perspectives, so that when you are getting into maybe a sticky argument or discussion about a particular issue, people can remember more readily that okay, people have very different and very valid you know, perspectives that they're coming from, and we need to remember that. I want to go back to something that Leslie asked, I think in regards to this idea about sharing appreciations. And she says, you know, does it feel like we're just forcing folks to say nice things about someone? My response to that is you can always say something nice about, you can not say something nice, you can always share an appreciation about someone, even if you barely know them, right? And the thing about appreciations is you want to make sure that it's not an appreciation of something that they did for you, right? You're taking yourself out of the center. You're centering that person that you are appreciating. You're appreciating something about them. You know, so like, Karen, I'm going to appreciate you right now for, it's really nice the way that you have, put some art on the wall of your room there, because it helps to, it gives everybody something to look at, but it also, I can see how that would make your space feel friendlier or something, right? You don't, it doesn't, I guess some people might feel as though it can be forced, but I feel like there's always something nice to say about someone, even if you're quarreling with them. I actually was just in a training last weekend when we were doing appreciations, and I was sitting next to someone who I don't always agree with. In fact, I disagree with her more often than not. And I was paired up with her, and I was like, okay, here we go. And I found that it was like, okay, I really do appreciate how you speak your truth all the time. Like, you never mince words. You're not afraid to speak about, what you really believe in. And I think that, yeah, sure. There are plenty of quote negative things that probably can come into my mind, or that I might think about someone, but there's always an appreciation in there somewhere. And just saying it, both saying it and hearing it, I think can really help to dissolve some, barriers, whether they be artificial or not. Marcella is saying, in some of the meetings I've attended, we follow a circle so that we can introduce ourselves and who we are. And I think it's very beautiful. I would completely agree. Doing an opening check-in, an opening circle, and also I'd say a closing circle can really help to set a tone for sharing, and a tone for empathy and cooperation right from the start of the meeting. Yeah, Leslie's saying she was going to do this. You're talking about appreciations maybe in a meeting, and I decided not to because it felt a little uncomfortable with how folks might feel forced. I mean, consider it is all I'm going to say. I know that there are, it's like, try it out, or even say, hey, I'm going to try this and let's talk about how it went. Did it feel forced, or did it feel good? Or what about it felt forced? Lisa, we start our meetings out with sharing something that we're grateful for in that week. Yep, helps us soften up and usually gives a positive tone to the meeting. We share appreciations with each other quite often. Okay. All right. Thanks everyone for your contributions to this discussion. Let's go. Well, my last slide on this point is we can go to we have this one up. Sorry, I missed it. Yeah, so just what other kinds of ways can we address these types of level 2 conflicts? Some people have already talked about doing open and go rounds. It's like, there's like there's things like energizers you can do, like just taking a break and doing an energizer, to build more of a shared culture, or build your group culture. Or you can do something that's a more of an investment, I guess, of time, but I think can really pay off, of even just, having a conversation about internalized oppression and how that shows up in meetings, how that shows up with groups. Right? I think a lot of people who are organizing around making change are often, well, we all have many identities, but often have at least one identity that tends to be, oppressed in some way. And so people will often go for who they know. If you've ever heard that, people who are of an oppressed identity tend to put that energy to other people who are in a similar situation with them, rather than actually, address or confront the oppressor. And so in a lot of groups, that internalized depression can show up in the ways of people sabotaging one another, or just not giving each other the airspace that they might need. It's a lot of different ways that it shows up. So that could even be a very important use of time for a group. If you feel as though people aren't, maybe aren't participating fully, are withholding important parts of their realities, or if a group doesn't feel safe. So failure to communicate, failure to come to agreement, or to just discuss openly issues that are going on might be a trigger that you need to have maybe a deeper conversation as a group, that's not necessarily in that time of that particular decision you're trying to make. Let's take just a 2-minute break for our language justice team to rest their minds, and I'm going to switch gears. And actually, whoever is flipping the slides, maybe we just put the next slide on the screen. And if people want to just read through that, they can do that in the next minute. I'll talk about it more in a minute. Okay. Has it been 2 minutes, or? Are people back? Okay. So we'll spend the rest of the training tonight talking about ideas for managing difficult meeting dynamics. So these on the screen here, these are 7 different scenarios that probably some of you have run into at least 1 or 2 of these, whether you're leading the meeting or you've just experienced this as a participant in a meeting. I'm going to read through them. Okay, so these are some difficult meeting dynamics. Okay, so one is like 1 or 2 silent members in a group, right? In a group that otherwise participates fully, you just have 1 or 2 members that like never talk. Another issue, 2 members get into a heated discussion, or quote lock horns, right? They can't seem to disengage from each other during the meeting. 3, One person talks all the time or dominates the conversation. 4, someone starts talking before others have finished. 5, low participation by the entire group. 6, quibbling about procedures. So taking this up as like a procedural thing when you're trying to talk about content of something. Or 7, a speaker has difficulty expressing themselves. So who has seen, why don't you type in the chat the numbers of these scenarios that you have experienced? Nobody's seen any of these? Oh, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3. All of them seem fairly common. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, these are pretty common issues, right? 3, we have someone that has a conversation dominator in their group. Okay. All right. So what we're going to do is, well, before we do this, before we break out, we're going to have a little breakout group time to tussle with some possible solutions to these scenarios. But what I want to ask you first is, which of the how might be some of how might some of these problems be group problems? Someone like to take a chance on talking about even just how one of them might be a group problem. One person dominating might be a group problem. Yeah, if there's no no clear structure for people to participate. Any other thoughts on how others or that one are a group problem? Number 2. You want to talk a little bit more about that? Low participation. Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on why you think these are group problems or how they're group problems.
Hola.
Yeah, hi. Jessica.
Hola, soy Jessica.
Hi, I'm Jessica, and I see number 2. That's something that I see often when 2 members get into a heated discussion or lock horns, and this could be during the meeting or outside of the meeting. And I think it could it could create issues for the group, because they don't let the group to advance or to really reach the purpose of the meeting. And this happens when there's different groups of people, different people with different cultures, and yes, sometimes there's tension or problems.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I so absolutely it causes problems for the whole group. And I guess I'm wondering also if someone else has a thought on how that might be a problem with how the group is set up, or like, is this a facilitation problem, or does this arise because the group is not functioning well? Lisa's saying, could it be the facilitator's problem for not knowing or not being trained in how to handle the group? Yeah, I mean, you know, I I have a great book on facilitation that basically takes almost any problem you could imagine in a group and throws it back on the facilitator, saying that, you know, you think this is a problem with these people just having this personality, but really maybe you should have set up the conversation so that people can feel listened to, or maybe the information about the meeting could have been sent out ahead of time, or maybe the decision-making process feels too limiting for people, right? So these things around shared communication, a clear purpose and goals, right? Why are we all here? Having a safe space where people feel heard and they feel appreciated, having clear structure and sort of, you know, ways that the group, you know, make decisions, ways that we have, again, like some group standards or group agreements, like how are we going to be with each other? Let's make some agreements about that so that it heads off, it prevents, you know, some of these conflicts from arising. So yeah, there's all kinds of different things. Yeah, I'll share the name of the book. I'll try to remember it. But yeah, so it's something to think about, as a leader, not to give you more worries. But anyway, so let's look at this. I have a handout that I think we are that I think is going to be shared in the chat. Can we do that? And we could flip to the next slide as well. So I'll talk about what this slide is before you get this piece of paper. So here, this issue, someone starts talking before others have finished. This was, I think, issue, let me just go back for a second, trying to remind myself. Sorry, 1 second. So issue number 4, right? Someone starts talking before others have finished. So what is on this document, this handout that is coming out to you that you'll be talking about in your small groups, is it lists the problem or the issue, one of these 7 problems, or all of these 7 problems, down the left-hand side. And then what it has in here is the typical mistake that a leader makes. So in this one, it says typical mistake is as the facilitator, right? You let them speak and then you go back to the person who was interrupted, right? Ideas for effective responses are in the right-hand column, and so this recommendation is no, you step in immediately, saying, hold on, let this person, it says let X, let this person finish their statement. Like, hold your thought, hang on. Take a moment to stack the people who want to speak. I don't know if any of you are familiar with stacking, but if there's a lot of hands that are going up or people really want to talk, which is always great, you really want to, you know, see that participation, you can say, okay, I have Molly and then Jack and then, you know, Karen and then Jessica, you know, so I have you, I see you and you're going to speak in that order. And sometimes it allows people to just, okay, I don't have to jump in because I know that my ticket is coming. I know that I'm going to have a chance. So those are sort of 2 ideas, or maybe both used together, to address that problem, instead of just being more passive, as in that first one, where it's like, well, okay, everybody knows that person's kind of rude for interrupting, but let's just let them speak and then we'll go back to the first person. Which can set a tone for anybody doing that in the future, right? So it's like, no, we're not going to allow that. We're gonna let people finish, and then we're gonna, you know, be respectful of each other. It's another ground rule that I see a lot, right? You know, respect for people's opinions. Okay, so in the In the chat, you will see there is a link. And so if you want to click on one of them, Espanol or English, or both, you may. And Leslie is going to put us into groups. And so your job in your group is to just talk about your, talk about the worksheet, talk about the ideas that are on there. Hang on just one second. Yeah, so it has these 7 problems we just looked at, along with these typical mistakes and ideas for effective responses. So discuss them and think and talk about where you think one or more of the ideas might help your group that you're working with. Okay, so you'll have 20 minutes to meet in your small groups and discuss the worksheets, and then we'll come back and have time to talk about it and talk about where it can help you, where you don't think it's going to be helpful. I'm excited to hear what you come back with. So Leslie, I think, are you making groups or someone else? I can't remember who.
Leslie, gracias, Aley.
This is Leslie. Thank you, Aley. Yes, I am working on the groups. If I could just get confirmation that everyone has access to the documents. We already shared the links on the chat. So if you have any questions or doubts, please send a message on the chat. Let me know. But yeah, working on it. We have 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, very well. Okay, I have opened all breakout groups. There's gonna be about 2-3 people per breakout group.
This is Leslie. Just a reminder to please reselect your language channels. Habla Leslie, por favor recuerden seleccionar su idioma de canal, su canal de idioma, perdón. This is Leslie. Just a reminder for folks to choose your language channel. Un recordatorio a todos para que elijan su canal de idiomas.
All right. So welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your conversations. I'd love to hear from each group if possible. How many breakout groups were there? Leslie, how many rooms?
5.
5, okay. Could we just go room? People might not know what room they were in. I'd love to just hear from each room, like what some of the highlights were from your discussions, or we could just popcorn, whoever feels like talking. Any ideas that you read about or talked about that you think you want to try? Anything that was surprising to you? Anything that you're skeptical of? I'd love to hear. Everybody else would love to hear too, I'm sure. Come on, don't be shy. Must have had some conversation for that whole time.
Okay, I'll go ahead and share.
Thanks, Lisa.
So we spent, Ariel and I, it was just the 2 of us, and we spent some time getting to know each other and talking. We definitely shared about, the majority of a lot of the, the problems. Number 2 is one that we discussed, because that did kind of happen. Not really bad, but it, you know, it kind of well, it did happen. And then for me, it was just kind of like, oh, that didn't happen. And it did. And then I had to kind of like get the team back in, you know, I had to reel everything back in, and then just kind of take the focus off of what happened, you know, and just say, okay, we've been a great team thus far. These are the great things we've been doing and we have done, and we don't want to ruin it by doing this. So let's focus back on, you know, on what the mission really is, on what the mission is. And so, yeah, because like I was telling Ariel, I tend to, you know, try to focus on positivity and peace. And so I don't do well with conflict, because I don't like conflict, but then again, who does? So that when it does happen, it's just kind of like, okay, how can we turn it into a positive? So we did discuss that. And other than that,
were there any solutions or ideas that were like surprising or interesting that you think you want to try?
No,
Or maybe other people too, not just Lisa, but yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah, you know, not really. I mean, we just, you know, pretty much just kind of discussed the situation and, you know, how we, you know, kind of turned it around. And,
okay.
You know, we tend to be pretty positive, and so I just like keeping it that way.
Okay.
But I think in the future, you know, I think I would probably still handle it the same way, but probably not be as surprised by it, you know? So, yeah.
All right, thank you for
It
sharing.
happens, conflicts do arise, so, yeah.
Sure. How about anyone else? What were your conversations like? Did you see anything that surprised you, anything that inspired you? Had any of you tried the things that were, quote, the mistakes and saw yourself in there? Jessica, I see your hand. Oh, we can't hear you.
Mi nombre es
Oh, hola.
Jessica y quería compartir
Oh, hello. My name is Jessica, and I wanted to share a bit. I was in group number 4 with Miss Mildred, and the first point I think is on what we discussed when we have a group that is culturally accustomed to be a bit more quiet, a bit more reserved. I had commented to Miss Mildred that, you know, my personality is a bit introverted, and adding to that, of all siblings, I am the middle child, but you could say that sort of as the youngest is a boy, it's a little bit different. I'm Mexican. And for example, in my family, until I was asked, I didn't share my opinion. And so if it was a more serious matter, then it was taken care of by my parents. And so obviously, as I get older, things change. But when I'm in a group and I am participating, I'm not the facilitator. So what happens is that sort of like unconsciously, I take on sort of like that same role of listening and taking notes. And if I'm asked, then I share. And so Miss Mildred and I shared that it's very important to know who are the people that are in your group and to get to know them from the beginning. And if you have new folks that are maybe sort of, coming in every month or something like that, to take, a few minutes maybe before the meeting and to share, how would you like to participate today? To say, would you like to be asked for your opinion? Would you like to share it in the chat, for example? Because, it's possible that we each have a different energy, before the meeting. So that's what I wanted to share. I'm sorry that that it was a bit long.
No, don't apologize. That's a very yeah, and I think that's a very important observation about, yeah, I mean, about that problem that people might perceive, oh, some people aren't talking. But I think this remembering that some people feel more comfortable when they are, invited, like making sure that that invitation is put out for people to talk. And sometimes it's hard too, like knowing or that walking that line between inviting people to share and putting people on the spot, calling them out. But thank you for raising that nuance that you discussed. Dora, I see your hand. Por favor. I think you're on mute.
Bueno, gracias.
Oh, well, thank you. Good afternoon to everyone. I am Dora. I was in group or room 5, and we were analyzing, and the great importance of the values of the participants of a group. And I wanted to join at a time when there was a question that hadn't been had for a while, when there was a debate among one or two or more folks. Me personally, I could say that in terms of that behavior, I like I like for it to be known that because I am quiet doesn't mean that I am in agreement, right? But I do always sort of respect the leadership, because in order to become leaders in what it is that we are learning, I would say that our cultures influence this very much, because for one person from one place, what bothers one person from one place maybe doesn't bother someone else from another place. And so when I've seen these sorts of situations, I think that with silence, I think I do something greater, because if I get into this sort of like quibbling group, it's going to get even worse, but I think that with good leadership decisions, those moments should be left for after the meeting, once things are a little bit less heated, to be able to clear things up.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I have a question.
And also in terms of when we talk about culture.
Sí, señora. Escucho.
Yes, I'm listening.
Oh, okay. I'm wondering if the recommendations that are in the handout around either forming small groups for people to talk, or even just, I think what you're saying, even just allowing for some silence for people to think before responding. If any of the recommendations seem like they would be appropriate. And maybe this is to other people, like maybe to Jessica
Súper,
and Mildred as
súper
well,
apropiadas.
or Marcela.
Yes, yes, super appropriate.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Gracias.
Yeah. Gracias.
Thank you.
Anyone else have anything to say about their conversations or the worksheets or some of the ideas on there? What are you excited to try? Or where are you still anxious or unsure?
Perdón.
See?
Excuse me?
Does someone want to speak? Is that? Please go ahead.
Yo pienso lo que me da un poco de miedo.
I think that what gives me a little bit of fear on my group when they do new things with technology, because I don't know too much about technology, but sometimes they make me feel uncomfortable. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. That's a very good point. For thinking about leading meetings and how we can be as inclusive
Sí,
and
eso es eso es un punto muy importante, el pensar cómo podemos ser inclusives al diseñar estas reuniones.
claro. All right, I'm looking at the time and I think we need to wrap up. I need to hand it
Ok,
back
estoy
to
mirando
Leslie.
al tiempo
Oop, I think
y
someone's still on the
parece
English
que
channel. Oops, okay. But I think I'll hand, I really thank all of you for your contributions today. I hope that you found this useful, and I will follow up with a couple of things. Someone was asking for the name of that book. So I'll see if I can find that again and raise it. And yeah, other than that, I'm going to hand it back to Leslie right now.
Habla Leslie, mil gracias Aley por estar aquí con nosotros.
This is Leslie. Thank you so much, Aley, for being here with us. Cultivemos is so grateful for all of your work and for showing us so much. Thank you to all of the participants that were here. I have shared the evaluation in the chat, and please just take about 5 minutes to complete it so that we can receive some of your feedback around this workshop. I also want to give thanks to our language justice team for supporting with everything that you've seen, for interpreting these meetings and ensuring that we can access them in 2 languages. And thank you to La Fuerza Latina for always being present, to Jessica, to Jack, Lisa, Ariel. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mildred, for being here with us, Marcela and Dora. And I know that I'm grateful to y'all. If you have any questions or concerns, you can write to me using my email, and I will be sharing the slides with y'all and the recordings and the documents as well as the evaluation via email. Good?
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Bye.
Ciao todos.
Make sure you do the evaluation.